I have an example for you in your question. So there's a company I'm an angel investor in that I'm really proud of called Wealthfront.
Oh, sure.
It's Andy Ratcliffe, who's a former top benchmark VC who became an entrepreneur. And he actually went from being a VC to an entrepreneur at the same time I went from being an entrepreneur to VC. So we call each other and torture each other relentlessly over both of those transitions. So he had this sort of key observation starting Wealthfront. So Wealthfront's an online money management company. And it's literally an alternative to having your money be managed by a stockbroker or by a bank or something like that. And he basically made this observation that many books have been written about, but the problem had never been solved, which is money management sort of for consumers is kind of a scam, where there's a lot of banks and money management firms and mutual fund complexes that will take your money and basically invest it, charge you giant fees, and return you basically the market average over time minus whatever fees they charge you. And it's kind of this thing that just people. There's been a whole book. Jack Bogle of Vanguard has written book after book after book of kind of how bad this stuff all is. And the only approach has been to basically just invest in these kind of sort of index funds that don't try to do anything smart. And so Andy put together this whole team and this whole approach to have basically let's apply Silicon Valley software thinking to money management and let's have a really smart way of doing money management and doing it right. And there's all these, how to do tax losses properly and asset allocation and, life, life, duration planning and the role of insurance and kind of there's all these different kind of things you would do if it was just easy to use the software. And so he built the software, took it to market, and it was exactly one of these things where it's like a $2 trillion industry, but the knife fight customer by customer against the massive marketing budgets coming from all these bad companies was going to be very tough. So what he did, he called me up one day and he said, I think I figured it out. And he said, it turns out, surprise, surprise, and this was like in 09, 010 is when this really started. So it turns out there are some of these new Silicon Valley companies that are actually working, like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And they're actually succeeding, and they're actually hiring a lot of employees, and they're actually their valuations are rising, and their revenues are rising, and at some point they're going to go public, and their employees are going to start to actually have money to invest. And by the way, they're primarily engineers inside these companies, and I think if I took this product in and I explained, basically this is money management for engineers, and I explained what I did, they would say, well, this is obvious that this is better than anything else I could get. And so to his point, he kind of reduced it all the way down to nose counting, 3 or 4 years ago, nose counting of okay, how many new successful Silicon Valley companies are there, and then how to get in front of their employee bases. And that worked. And so now the whole thing is extrapolating out from that.
Right.
But he had to bring it all the way down to a very specific customer segment before he could figure out how to unlock the broader market.
It's one of those dichotomies, dualities maybe, that I think entrepreneurs really struggle with. You kind of have to go narrow to go broad or go small to go big. What advice do you give your founders who are struggling with that, who want to build a product for everybody on day one, who want to do the biggest possible launch, do the most, go big to go big and basically almost guarantee themselves failure?
I think I'm a believer in your philosophy there, where I think you said once, did Google? It's ironic that Google launched Wave when they never actually launched Google itself, right? So all of their sort of best products didn't have launches. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
Google.
I'll pick it up.
I'm trying to think of the example, but go ahead.
Yes, he's trying not to.
You guys should be able to read each other's mind by now.
He's trying not to offend anybody.
No.
Yeah.
It's not a problem I've ever had. I've actually changed my thinking on this a lot in the last 5 years. So I came up, I sort of learned everything kind of actually at the tail end of kind of the old model of kind of, in the 90s of you just apply a massive marketing blast to everything. You go big or go home. And the reason is because it's just, there's so much noise in the market. It's so hard to get a message through, and you just go for maximum force as fast as you can, and you just try to hit the entire market. And by the way, when that works, it's glorious. There are companies that just come out of the chute and they just, get big and it's just great. I've become more of a convert, and Brian Chesky is a guy I've learned a lot on this at Airbnb. And the big thing that Brian always says is, he's it's not, basically you guys, meaning me, are over-focused on market size. It's, can you get 100 customers who are just absolutely thrilled with you, just thrilled and giddy. And this goes back to the nose counting market sizing thing, because if you can get 100 of those, then you can get another 1,000, and then you can get another 10,000, and then another 100,000, and a million, and then you're talking. And then that's related to another thing that we observe a lot in a lot of the work that we do is the market sizes for a lot of the kinds of things that we're talking about are much larger today. The total addressable market is just larger today than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the internet and mobile phones have had a huge impact on that. In the late 90s, total addressable market for internet companies was 50 million people on dial-up. mostly on AOL, which barely counted.
Yeah.
And people would use the internet 2 or 3 times a day if they could get through the dial tone and get through and actually get a connection at 14.4 kilobits. And today, everybody's on their smartphone at 20 megabits, 80 times a day.
Yeah.
And there's 2 billion people with smartphones on its way to 5 billion people. And so I think the pressure, at least how I feel a little bit, is I've taken the pressure off myself of saying, okay, how big is the total market? Let's just take a little bit more for granted that markets are actually going to be large, just because the world has effectively gotten bigger. And then let's really focus in on who the enthusiastic customers are out of the gate, and then figure out how to tie the thread between them.
Yeah, I think a lot about the. I agree with the find something a few people love and not sort of everyone likes. And I think also, if you think about most of the best products, they'll start off finding, it's just a little bit like Crossing the Chasm. If you haven't read that, it's a great book. But it's sort of what they call the bowling pin strategy, where you find a cluster of people who all sort of know each other and talk, or companies if you're selling B2B, and you get them to love it and share it, and then hopefully they have sort of spillover effects into other clusters. And this is, of course, how Mark knows more about it than I do, but how Facebook started off. The sort of college students loved it, and someone went to Harvard, and they loved it, and they went to high school with someone at Princeton, and then it spread over there. And actually, that pattern, I think, repeats itself in a lot of businesses, including, as you really, and this goes to also the point of nose counting and really understanding the market. When you really understand the market, you also know that in the pharmaceutical industry, everyone knows that. I'm just making this up, but Pfizer is the one that adopts the new technology, and everyone else follows it, and you know that, and you know the sort of patterns of how the IT people here are influenced by the IT people here, and so you sort of really understand that cluster. And I think of startups as sort of, you're in 3 modes, where it's just the first time you're sort of in search mode, where you're kind of looking for the right clusters, and then you're sort of, okay, I found 2 that might work, let me go and see if my product works there. And then the third phase, once you've accomplished that, is to then spread out into more.
Can I generalize from
and
these
to me,
clusters?
and to me, and I think it kind of goes to your kind of hypothesis testing mode. It's generally almost always a mistake to sort of skip step 1 and 2 and go directly to the market when you don't even know if it works in which clusters and how it's going to spread and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're running out of time, and so I thought this would be a good kind of last question. And the question is, what do you think will be the most revolutionary change in the way startups get built and funded in the next 5 years? And don't say Bitcoin.
A lot of people would say crowdfunding. I think that's sort of the top candidate.
How do you guys feel about that?
AngelList or something.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, we see startups. I mean, I got to tell you, catnip for a venture capitalist is walk in the door with $5 million of pre-orders.
Yeah.
We'll jump right out of our chairs. It's spectacular. Yeah, so crowdfunding is going to be very, very big. And then the other is just, I think, big data analytics, the ability to kind of take the big data model and apply it to more and more markets, more and more industries, more and more spaces, more and more aspects of the experiment. Kind of counter-arguing, I don't know, maybe it's the sort of big data analytical component, married to, I think, what is going to be a renaissance in sort of old school brick by brick company building, sales and marketing. And there's all kinds of very interesting hybrid models now. You see this in a lot of enterprise software. There's these extremely interesting models now for viral propagation of enterprise products that, sort of consumerized enterprise products. And then you overlay a state-of-the-art, high-end Salesforce on top of that, and then they go in later and they go get all the money. And the combination of the 1-2 punch is extremely powerful. And so a renaissance of the old methods combined with the best of the new methods, I think, is going to be a big deal.